we really want employers to think about it, right? And so, if your position is we will eliminate half our workforce because of AI, well, that's a very different employer and a very different conversation than somebody who's saying, this will allow us to work 4 days a week, but still produce the same output and everybody can have a day off.
Welcome back to the Tourism AI podcast, where we give you the latest scoop on all things artificial intelligence and let you know how it all relates back to the tourism industry. So, going to be talking about a few different developments in artificial intelligence this week. Super cool stuff, and some really interesting nuggets on how that kind of relates back to tourism. So I'd love to jump in and talk about customer service. We've really been speaking a lot about how AI can really boost your opportunities for customer service and great customer service in the tourism industry. But Peter, obviously we're finding a lot of interesting takeaways from a recent Forbes article. I'm hoping you can walk us through some of the tactics that they're suggesting.
Yeah, thanks, Emily. So this Forbes article kind of caught my attention because customer service is obviously a big part of the tourism industry. And I think for me personally, probably the lowest hanging fruit from an unlock perspective. So the Forbes article is actually written by somebody with a lot of experience in the customer service field, and they gave tested tactics, or they provided seven tested tactics for using AI well in the customer service. So I'll read those seven tactics, and then we can kind of talk about them. So one is leverage AI for repetitive tasks. Anything data driven and repetitive. That's kind of the sweet spot for all things AI these days. Enhance human AI collaboration. So integrating AI with human agents can improve overall efficiency. AI can provide agents with real-time information and suggestions. So this is a really interesting piece like that. We talked about this with respect to Kelowna the other day, where there's an opportunity for two-way feedback, which is really cool. Number three, personalized customer interactions. So obviously AI can analyze customer data and offer personalized recommendations. So again, wherever there's the opportunity for the AI to access and leverage individualized data for that person or that customer they're talking to, then it could, obviously sound that much more personalized and be that much better. I really like this number four. It's implement AI in multi-channel support. So today's AI is not just written, it's voice, it's video, it's sort of got all the different channels and chat and email and social media. So, these tools are available now and they can sort of talk in just about any modality and any channel, which is really cool. Invest in training and development. Yeah, I think that one we'll probably talk about a lot throughout this podcast and probably for the rest of our lives. We'll get into that one. Focus on data security. I think this is a really important one as well. So obviously there's a lot of trust issues and data questions out there. So making sure that, not only are you everything you're implementing has an extra level of scrutiny when it comes to data security, but also I think that you're communicating clearly to your customers and your potential customers about how data is stored, how you're using AI and things like that. And then obviously monitor and optimize AI systems continuously, making necessary adjustments. So, it's not a set and forget thing. It's really an ongoing kind of thing. So what I will say about this list, Emily, is that if I look at this list, kind of reminds me or makes me think about working with a human, quite frankly. And so, I think that thinking about AI from a customer service perspective is a lot like training a new human from a customer service perspective, right? So what are those data sources? What are the repetitive things that they probably will get really good at really quickly? What are the things that they might need to escalate to somebody else, right? How can we provide feedback and make them better, right? All invest in training and development. You would do that with a human too, right? So, it sort of kind of reminds me of, again, thinking about how to work with a human and make them a really good customer service agent. I think a lot of the same principles, quite frankly, apply to AI-driven customer service.
No doubt. And I think that that's kind of, potentially an overlooked piece of AI, as it is really, meant to be a new member of your team. It's there to support you. We've talked about how it's an augmentation tool to just make your life easier and better in terms of your role day to day, but also in terms of these customer service pieces. What are the things that you can sort of delegate to AI rather than, consuming all of your time, especially with those repetitive tasks? That's obviously a huge use case for AI across the board, not even necessarily just in customer service.
Yeah, and I think every single business probably has the same, I don't know, 15, 20 questions asked over and over again. And then there's the more complicated stuff, right? So, I mean, I think if you can just think about AI to support you in those data-driven, repetitive everybody asks the same questions kind of things, you could probably go pretty far without getting too sophisticated.
Yeah, no kidding. I'm wondering, Peter, just, putting my marketing hat on for a second, do you think that there's potentially value from a data perspective, but also just in terms of informing, repetitive outputs? Do you think there's value for folks in tourism to do sort of customer persona reports, sort of building those key people that you're going to be seeing each time, at your tourism experiences, and using that data to sort of inform the tools in terms of their responses and, potentially reducing those repetitive asks all the time?
Yeah, I think so. I think to the extent that you can sort of, I guess, tell who you're talking to, or the AI can tell who it's talking to. So I think wherever there's an opportunity to tie the AI customer service agent into, a data file that tells you a little bit about the client, then to your point, I think if that client fits a certain persona or demographic, then you can certainly tailor the responses to that persona or demographic. I mean, I think that we're getting to a place more and more where there's going to be one-to-one personalization when it comes to AI and its interaction with humans, but that only works if it's connected to data sources. So I think the challenge that many tourism businesses are going to have is probably don't have the best data in the first place. And if you don't have the best data in the first place, the AI is only as good as the data that it's sort of driving from, right? And so the starting point for many tourism businesses is probably better data management, better customer management, better, thinking through the information you need about your customers in order to provide good personalized responses through AI. So that's probably a starting point. But I think, you can probably start without all of that data, at least in a general way, and have customer service, AI-powered customer service agents provide general data, at least if you don't have the sort of more specific customer data available.
Nice. Yeah, I think there's, potentially the opportunity for the tool itself to get better because it's constantly learning from the data it's receiving, right? But you do have to be careful with that, I think, too, and just make sure that if you are able to go into the back end and clean up the data that it's picked up on, that's probably what you want to do.
Yeah, you know what's interesting is that we've had a few AI enablement sessions with a few businesses as of late, and this has come up quite a lot in terms of things like, for example, companies having multiple different systems where they input data, and those systems not talking to one another well. And so, the ask keeps coming up. Can AI help us, create processes where if we put something into one data source or CRM or whatever it is, can it talk to another? And that's another great use case, like sort of a back end use case for AI to help systems talk more so that if your people, your agents, whoever's working for you doesn't have to input the same information into 2, 3, 5 places, depending on how convoluted your setup is, right? I mean, ultimately, I think everybody really needs to think about themselves in terms of the data that they're collecting and how they're collecting it, and sort of really think about streamlining into a good CRM system like a HubSpot or whatever that looks like for you and your business. But really thinking about data has always been an important source and thing. But I think in the age of AI, data is going to be probably one of the most important things for every business to think about in terms of how to leverage the data they have to provide the best AI-driven customer service and or internal service or whatever that looks like. Again, it's only as good as the data. So I think there's a big data cleanup coming.
Yeah, huge. I think make sure you're keeping an eye on your data, regardless of whether or not you're using AI. Quality data is never gonna, sway you the wrong way. So keep that in mind. I want to ask a couple more questions before we move on. Peter, I'm wondering if you can comment on how human AI collaboration can enhance overall efficiency, especially with respect to customer service.
Yeah, I mean, I think that, a couple different ways to answer this question is number one, obviously having the AI there for basic things and simple things and having the human there for more complex stuff. So, that's, I think, easy starting point. But also, the humans learning from the AI interactions and the AI interactions learning from the human interactions. So, for example, if you have AI trained on your 20 most basic questions and you have customer service agents handling the rest, well, you should record those customer service inquiries and responses and then use that for training data for the AI, right? So the AI can get better and be able to handle more complex problems and questions based on the way your customer service agents respond to those questions, right? So I mean, I think that's one kind of area. I think another area is just sort of monitoring the types of questions and the types of inquiries that come in and understanding how the AI actually responds to those and sort of checking to see if the AI is responding correctly, if it needs to be improved on, where is it getting the data from that it's using to respond, sort of there's an ongoing, I think that we're in this place of this ongoing loop, communications loop or feedback loop when it comes to the AI and the human and how they interact from a customer service perspective and how those interactions can get better over time, right? I think there's could be some other things that you could do. For example, if people are willing to provide a quick, survey, how was your customer service experience today out of 1 to 10? What could have made it better or whatever? Obviously, if AI is providing the responses, then if it's getting sixes or whatever, then there's a need for the human to step in and figure out what's going on there. Versus if it's getting tens and the humans are getting sixes, well, maybe we should take a look at that as well, right? So again, I think it's going to be this interesting feedback loop and information loop. I mean, at the end of the day, the interesting part about AI compared to humans is the ability for artificial intelligence to, you know, absorb a lot of information very quickly, make, inferences from that information, summarize that information, you know, so if I think about even things like, comments on social media and you know what I mean? So that's a little bit outside the direct customer service line, maybe. But if people are complaining, or maybe it's Google reviews or something like that, right? It's like, what are all the things people are saying and consistently on your social channels, on your Google, on your reviews, whatever, in terms of, let's just say, bad customer service or people that are unhappy? It's like, you know what? Can we use AI as an example to review all that data, summarize it for us, and help us, come up with responses proactively, right? So I think there's a lot of power in using it as a research tool as well on your various different channels to understand how people are reacting with your brand or perceiving your brand or what experiences they're having, and to sort of use that information to kind of proactively provide better service or to proactively respond to what we see as commonly raised complaints or whatever it might be.
Totally. And I think you've made an important point about that feedback loop in terms of, because we're still learning from the tool and the tool is still learning from us, we're not quite at the point where AI is a set it and forget it sort of thing yet, especially in the space of customer service. And honestly, just because of the nature of people, I don't know if that will ever be an arena where you can just set it and forget it. It's something that you probably want to keep coming back to make sure that it's giving those outputs that are really setting you up for success.
Yeah, and I'm going to take a complete tangent now, Emily, and talk about my favorite show on TV, which is Big Brother. So Christina and I, my wife and business partner, started watching the summer Big Brother. So that's like our favorite summer programming. And the reason I'm raising this in context of what I'll call customer service is because they're doing something neat on Big Brother, and they've introduced an AI into, basically, I don't exactly understand, but I think what the AI is doing is essentially adjusting the game based on how people are interacting with each other, what it's watching, what it's hearing. Also, the point, this is where it fits for this customer service part, is based on all of the feedback from all Big Brother watchers in the 26-year history of the show. So what they did was they essentially analyzed all the feedback from all of the people who watched it, all the super fans, all of everybody. And yesterday in the episode we watched, they like introduced some new ways to make the show more exciting, and it was awesome. Like, so, just for context, for who doesn't watch, for those who don't watch Big Brother, normally whoever's the head of household, so who wins the kind of main competition that week, picks two people to put on the block, and those two people become sort of subject and could be voted out of the Big Brother house. So the way the AI changed the game was by making the head of household pick three people. So more, for those Big Brother fans out there, more blood on the head of household's hands. But then what happens is there's some kind of competition amongst those three people right before the vote, and one of the people gets taken off the block, and there's only two remain, and the other house guests don't know who those two people are going to be that remain. So totally makes the game completely more interesting and more sort of exciting and more fun. But the reason I'm raising that in context of this conversation is because really they used customer feedback and data, and then they use the AI to analyze that customer feedback and then sort of make changes to the game to make it better and more exciting in the ways that people suggested it might be good. And I gotta say, as a, quote unquote super fan of the show, I was like, man, this is gonna be so good. I can't wait to watch this season. So, well done, Big Brother. And I think that's just a great use case of AI with respect to customer data, customer feedback, And so, the other thing I'll say on this topic just quickly before we move on is take every opportunity you can to get as much feedback as possible from your customers, and then feed that feedback into an AI and get it to give you, hey, give me recommendations, give me strategic approaches on how I can do it differently. How can I, make this a better experience for my customers? It's an amazing tool for those types of things. And I think it's very underutilized for those types of use cases.
That's super cool. I love that they're doing that. No excuses for the producers this year. It wasn't them. They didn't make they're not driving the bus on where the show is going. It's all
Yeah,
AI.
it's kind of neat. Like it's kind of like they've like handed over to the AI to run with it, and we're gonna see where it goes. So it's cool.
Awesome. Love it. There's your pop culture moment of the day. We're going to pivot now. We're going to talk about some research done by the Upwork Research Institute, actually telling us that AI is going to increase our workload before it decreases our workload. We've hinted at that before on the podcast, but I think a lot of people, are concerned about what this means for their jobs. Totally understandable. We're all kind of wondering what's going on in that space. But I think this is really interesting research that kind of makes commentary on that. So I'm hoping you can walk us through it, Peter, and tell us kind of what they found.
Yeah, I found this to be a fairly interesting study. I mean, I'll make a couple caveats in that I think that the heading for the study was a little bit misleading when it comes to when I actually look at the details of the study. So maybe a little bit of clickbait. We'll give them a break on that one. But and the other thing I'll say is that this is Upwork. So Upwork, for those who don't know, is a website where freelancers can sort of post themselves as available, and people can go find freelancers to go do work for them. So some of these findings perhaps we're a little self-serving towards the freelancer compared to the employee sort of dynamic. So, I won't get too deep into that, but I still think it was interesting research. And, a couple of interesting things that came out of it was, according to this study, AI adoption has not reduced workloads. Instead, it has often increased them. I think to me, the most interesting actually single stat that came out of this study was nearly half, 47% of employees using AI report they do not know how to achieve the expected productivity gains. And then, the other piece is that, employers really sort of have a very strong view in terms of the transformative impact on AI, and employees are not really seeing it. And that's very consistent with a lot of studies. So, there's this interesting thing going on in the work world where employees are using AI a lot without their employers. They're sort of shadow use of AI. So they're using it on their private devices and personally and at home, and they're not telling people that they're using them, and all this kind of stuff's going on. On the other hand, employers are super excited about AI and the productivity gains and all the promises and everything that it can do. Yet there are very few actual formal conversations about AI vision, AI use case, AI education and training, all the things needed to actually enable artificial intelligence to make the promises that everybody's expecting actually come true. So there's this really big disconnect, and I hope that it's just a matter of timing and people are just sort of trying to figure it out right now. But I don't know. I think employers really need to step up if they see this vision of AI and this promise of AI, but they're not willing to actually do the hard work of supporting and teaching and training and providing all the assistance their employees need to actually leverage the promise, then we're not going to get anywhere. We're not going to sort of see the results. And I think this Upwork study kind of shows that that's what's happening right now.
Yeah, we've stressed the importance of having those conversations on the podcast many times. Peter, I'm wondering if you can maybe give folks some advice who might be in that position, as the employer. They have expectations, maybe they don't have expectations yet. How do they start having those conversations with employees if they want AI to be a part of it, if they don't, how they want that to look?
Yeah. So self-servingly, I'll say go through the Tourism AI Network AI adoption framework. So we very deliberately created that framework to help with every single aspect of these different conversations, with the literacy, all the things, right? So that's my sort of self-serving commercial. But really, there just needs to be formal conversations. So Emily at CIPR Communications and Tourism AI Network, we have a weekly AI huddle, or we have a daily huddle, and once a week we talk about AI. We're supposed to have more meetings. We will have more meetings. It's sort of summertime right now, so things are a little bit sort of off the rails, but formal meetings where we talk about AI adoption. things like creating libraries of useful prompts for different work functions or job functions, things like creating custom GTPs with employees, or things like even allow, maybe having hackathon type events where it's like, hey, let's all create a custom GTP and then let's come together and talk and share, all do the same thing together and see which one produces the better results, and let's come together and then create a better custom GTP. So I mean, I think there's lots of different ways to get creative, but I think the number one thing that employees and employers need to do is just to start having more formal conversations about this. This idea that employees are using AI, but they're hiding it from their employers because their employers aren't talking about it, yet their employers have all these huge expectations of AI, tells me there's just this like massive disconnect happening in the workplace. And like the elephant in the room is there and nobody's talking about it. And that needs to change as quickly as possible.
Yeah, I wanted to ask you as well, as an employer, if you had an employee come to you, you were having those open conversations about AI and that piece of it was happening, but what would you do or what would you recommend? And this is kind of for my own curiosity, if you had an employee who was really resistant to the idea of integrating AI into their work for various reasons that we've talked about, but what would you recommend, an employer do in that scenario?
So I think the thing to do is just to have an open conversation. Why are you resistant? Is there a concern you have? Is it a matter of you don't understand it? You feel intimidated? Are you worried that you're going to lose your job? Right. So like, I mean, I think it's just a matter of having a really open conversation about why the employee is resisting it, understand from their perspective, and then sort of, work with them to, find solutions, I guess. What I will say back to the AI adoption framework is that we have, in the AI adoption framework, we have two different surveys in phase two. One is an employer survey, and that employer survey or the leader survey is very focused on, what's your AI vision? What is what are your goals? Here are a bunch of statements related to AI that might, kind of talk about your positioning towards AI. And some of those statements are things like, and they're very deliberately written statements like, oh, I will use AI and eliminate half my workforce. That's one statement. The other statement is, the statement right after that is, AI will make my workforce more productive and therefore we will be able to achieve more great things together, right? So it's like those are very different positionings. And the reason that we put the variety of statements into that positioning is because we really want employers to think about it, right? And so, if your position is we will eliminate half our workforce because of AI, well, that's a very different employer and a very different conversation than somebody who's saying, this will allow us to work 4 days a week, but still produce the same output and everybody can have a day off. That's a very different positioning from an employer perspective. But then we also, in that same phase two, do an employee survey. And in the employee survey, we ask questions about, are you worried about losing your job? Are you worried about, how do you want to be involved in this AI discussion with your employer? So, doing these surveys helps the leader understand their positioning and how they intend to use AI, and kind of gives a bunch of extremes to give sort of the ability to think things through. But it also gives that leader the ability to understand from their workforce how they're feeling, if they need training, if they need education, how involved they want to be in the AI discussion, So then if you have those two data points, it can help you have a much more informed conversation. And it can help you sort of take your organization forward in a way that meets employees where they're at. So like if literally you do a survey and like every single employee is worried that AI is going to take their job, and you're the employer and you filled out a survey saying, I don't want to lose anybody. I don't want to lose anybody. And I want to make everybody have a better job. Well, it's like you have a big disconnect. You have a communication problem,
Totally.
right?
Yeah.
And so it's really, I think, helpful to have the data points to know how to kind of handle and to kind of, like I said, meet your employees where they are and then sort of come together in a direction that's going to work for everybody.
Yeah, huge value there. I think lots of opportunity for some healthy conflict. We're a big fan of healthy conflict over here, but maybe not. Maybe there's actually more in common than you think there is already.
Well, I think, all of the studies out there, the Upwork study, I think everything shows us that actually there's probably more alignment than I think a lot of employers believe there is. And a lot of employees think so if the studies are showing us that shadow AI use is so high and that employees are using AI without their employers knowing it and on their personal computers and doing all this stuff, it's because their employers aren't talking about it. And so they are scared that they're going to get their hand slapped for using it. And so if employers are keen to get their workforce using it and they're not talking about it and their employees are using it, but hiding it, there's probably a lot of alignment there. And so let's get that out in the open, and let's actually get good productive conversations going on as to how to accelerate your organization with the use of these tools in a safe and responsible manner, as opposed to kind of everybody hiding in corners and pretending nothing's happening, right?
For sure. I want to acknowledge that, this is one of those topics where there's no immediate danger, but there is a lot of fear. And if you're afraid, we understand. I think, at various points in investigating artificial intelligence, both you and I and many members of our team have gone, holy crap, that's scary looking. But as we know, as humans, I think communication is the best way to sort of move past that, especially if it's between employer and employee. So
Yeah. And the biggest concern I have is that there's just not enough communication happening, which is why I feel like we're a broken record on this podcast. And much of the content we write is just, start using AI, start having very formal conversations, start getting feedback, start listening. And, I guess that's the other piece, right? Is like, I think a good leader listens more than they talk. And so probably that's the other thing. If employees are coming to you with concerns, hear them out, because those concerns probably come from a pretty legitimate place, or not. Maybe they come from a place of, I saw this on the news and this is what I think. Well, maybe there's a need for some AI education and literacy and training and things like that to help that person understand kind of what this is really all about and where it's at.
100%. And we are here to help. It's kind of a nice segue to our next topic. We're going to look a little bit at why technology adoption usually fails. Maybe not usually fails, but why it fails when it does. And then Peter's actually got some nuggets of wisdom, 10 AI positioning statements to help business leaders get started on a better path, especially with artificial intelligence. So, Peter, let's start by kind of breaking down why technology adoption can fail, and particularly in the space of AI.
Yeah. So let me give you context of where this, I guess, this topic came from, and the article I wrote about it came from, is that there are some reports out there that AI does not produce a return on investment, or it hasn't proven itself to be, useful for certain companies that have tried things. I'm not going to name the companies. And as I think about that, and I kind of read those case studies, and I see how they've approached, in some cases, AI, I really doubt that it's the technology, and I just think that it was poorly implemented. And so, generally speaking, and you know this, Emily, because you build websites, a website I'm going to use as a project, as a sort of an example project instead of talking about AI. But like, a website is a complicated project. There's lots of terminology. There's lots of things to know. There's lots of moving parts. It's not a simple, oh, just fill out this form and it's done. You think something's going to look away, it looks a different way when it's on. Like, it's complicated, right? And what I see often with websites, and I think I see something similar with AI, it's one of two things. It's like, okay, we need to build a website. Okay, junior person that's literally never built a project in their lives or done anything substantial, doesn't know much about the organization. It's your project, go. Right? And like, a website is like, it's an organization wide thing. It's a really big opportunity to rethink your organization from the ground up. How are we communicating? What's our messaging? Who are our audiences? How do we want them to interact with our brand? There's all these considerations when it comes to building a website. Kind of the same for AI, right? It's sort of like, I look at it as, you're going to be kind of rebuilding your processes and procedures from the ground up and making them more efficient and effective using these new tools that people need to learn how to use and understand. Like, this is a team effort, just like a website is a team effort. I think that, and in technology adoption, I see this with CRM adoption as well, all the time. And we've been pretty poor at CRM adoption, admittedly, right? So, you bring in a CRM and, okay, here, everybody start using it. And it's like, cool. One, I have no habits around using this. Two, I don't know how to use it. I hit a wall somewhere, or I hit something where I don't know what to do, and I get frustrated and I walk away, right? So there's just a lot of moving parts and a lot of moving pieces, and it's really a full court press and a big effort needed by everybody in order to get it done. And the other piece too is, you need to pretty clearly spell out, as a leader, your vision. Okay, so similar to a website, like, what is your vision for the website? What are your goals for the website? Right? What are you trying to achieve? What's the most important thing? What are the nice to haves? What are the must-haves, right? Like there's all these different things that you should consider. Then, you're ready to build a website, or then you're ready to implement a CRM, right? And so I think the problem most of the time is that people just jump to the technology or the solution, the shiny object, and they don't do all of the hard work ahead of time to actually make sure that the implementation is done thoughtfully, thoroughly, and with the right people at the table.
For sure. We've quite literally just said that it's going to be more work up front than, reducing your workload. So with any new tool, with any new project, et cetera, you're going to have to put the work in to understand how to use it properly. And that's okay. I personally was absolutely horrible at prompting for a while. And, obviously that can lead to some frustration and just saying, well, I'm done with this. I don't want to work with it anymore. I don't understand. It's okay to feel that way, but would not recommend just walking away from the tool and saying, well, I don't get it, so we're not going to use this.
Yeah.
Take a
And
break.
the other thing I'll say, Emily, is that if anybody has tried AI now and has concluded that there's no ROI with AI, it's way too early to make that
For sure.
conclusion. It's like we're at very, very early stages of this technology. It's not really the best technology we're going to see at all. It's going to get much, much better. A lot of the problems are going to go away. So just because it doesn't work now, we've talked about this before, just because this tool doesn't do exactly what you wanted to do the way you wanted to do it today, doesn't mean it's not going to do that tomorrow or in 6 months or a year from now. So that's the other piece, right? Like, don't like the timing isn't now to be definitively saying this doesn't work or doesn't do what we need it to do.
For sure. And we've talked about innovation as well. So if you're finding that a tool doesn't do what you need it to do, there's your business case right there. Make one that does,
Right?
especially in the tourism space. I think we're really trying to empower people to get creative and find their own solutions and, potentially build them. I think we're kind of in the preliminary stages of how we can do that, but we'd love to chat with you if you're interested in coming up with a new solution. We're happy to support however we can. Peter, I'm hoping you can tell us a little bit about these AI positioning statements. Tell us a little bit more about.
Yeah, so these positioning statements are positioning. So this is actually very aligned. I think this entire episode today sort of has a theme to it, but this
Yeah.
actually comes from these exact positioning statements don't come from phase 2 of my AI adoption framework, but they're the types of things you'll find in our employer survey. And so, for example, a positioning statement could be achieve operational efficiency, set a goal to increase operational efficiency by 10% through AI-driven process automation, reducing manual efforts and errors. Or boost revenue growth, leverage AI to identify new market opportunities and optimize pricing strategies, targeting a 20% increase in annual revenue without additional headcount. So I wrote a blog and I included positioning statements like this to give people a sense of like the types of very clear, well-defined statements that they should be sort of thinking about when they're putting together an AI roadmap or an AI strategy or thinking about what AI can do for them. So, if you just buy 3,000 AI licenses and then give them to your employees and, 3 months later say, well, AI doesn't work, it's like, well, what were you even trying to achieve? Does anybody know? And like back to the first conversation or the second conversation we have, it's like half the people don't even know what their employers want them to achieve with AI. So it's better off to say, let's talk about this boost revenue growth. Leverage AI to identify new market opportunities and optimize pricing strategies, targeting a 20% increase in annual revenue without additional headcount. Well, that is something that I can find a very narrow group of people in my company, say 2 or 3, give them that specific goal, obviously the sales department or the revenue growth department, and say, okay, how are we going to do this? And then build a pilot project around it. Now, all of a sudden, imagine you increase annual revenue by 20% and you have 3 people using a $20 tool to do that. And I could tell you, Emily, that specific one, optimized pricing strategies. I've used ChatGPT to come up with all kinds of pricing strategies and optimize pricing strategies. I've asked ChatGPT if I'm priced right relative to the market and to research for me. So, I mean, that's an easy low-hanging fruit use case. And again, a 20% increase in revenue without additional headcount. I mean, that is a substantial return on investment. So, the point of this piece here is, if you just have no vision, no direction, no positioning, no goals, and you spend a bunch of money on AI and then conclude that it doesn't produce an ROI, look in the mirror, because I don't think the problem is the technology, right? And so you need to be specific. You need to have smart goals, right? You need to measure, you need to be targeted, right? You need to really kind of be thinking about what you're doing. And then you can have, serious conversations about whether you're actually generating an ROI or not.
Yeah, I think there's a couple of pieces there. One is think outside the box. Don't limit yourself in terms of, you might have a tool that is for one thing in the media or whatever. Like I feel like ChatGPT is a good example of, it could be seen as, oh, well, it's good for writing, it's good for asking questions. That's where it ends. No, think outside the box, see what else you can ask it. It's such a wealth of knowledge. I mean, there's no end to what it can do for you, I would say. But the other thing that I want to note is we have used tools that we've walked away from, and we invested in them and
Yes.
we spent good money in them. And it's not that they were bad tools. That's not why we walked away. They just didn't suit our needs. And that's okay
Yeah.
too.
Or what I'll say, Emily, is we've actually paid for tools that were really good tools that were doing really good things for us. One in particular, I'm not going to name the name, and then all of a sudden ChatGPT came in and we created a custom GTP, and it did the same thing that tool did, which cost us 149 US a month for the $20 that it cost, right? So, unfortunately, we're in this place of constant evaluation and evolution. Everybody, as I think I mentioned before in a podcast, Professor Ethan Mullick from the Wharton School of Business in the US came out with a paper that said HR is R&D. So every person in your organization now is in the R&D department, in the sense that all of a sudden they have these tools that they should be using, testing, refining, improving, to make their jobs better. And that's actually where the unlocks exist. So again, I think that the problem is, one, employers thinking they're going to somehow dictate and tell people how they're going to unlock productivity in their jobs. They're just not in a position to do that. I mean, there are some things that the employers can do in terms of investing in specialized tools and maybe custom GTPs that work for everybody and that type of thing. But really, the unlocks are at the individual sort of worker level and their individual jobs and task level. If you can create a custom GTP or, a couple prompts or whatever at that level that can make things more efficient and effective across a 20-person organization, all of a sudden things add up pretty quick in terms of efficiency gains.
100%. We've seen, a ton of different unlocks on our team just based on people saying, okay, I don't like this part of my job, or how can I make this faster? Because it takes so long to do. And that's where we kind of find those unlocks. And then usually we'll come up with a custom GPT just to make things that much easier and faster, give it a smaller database to pull from, and huge successes that way.
Yeah, again, we were at this AI enablement session with an organization just yesterday, and they were describing a set of tasks that they do that kind of everybody in the organization does. And we started asking, okay, well, how long does it take to do that task? And how many times a day are you doing that task? And we did the math and we're like, wow, so if you can make that task more efficient, we can essentially save the equivalent of 1.5 full-time equivalents a year. And it was sort of an eye-opening moment for them, because it was like, wow, we spent a lot of time on this like really menial task that adds really little value to our organization, but needs to be done. But like in terms of like use of human resources, is like, it was sort of shocking to them when you put it into those terms, right? And now all of a sudden, if you're thinking about investing in an AI tool, it's like, okay, well, this can save you, 1.5 full-time equivalent people per year in terms of like man hours. Well, what's that worth to you? Okay, well, what if over 10 years it saves you, whatever, 15, like that's a lot, right? And so, that's how you got to be thinking about it. Okay, this task takes me 5 hours. Now it's 1 hour. Okay, well, that's 4 hours of time savings. This task takes me 30 minutes. Now it's 5 minutes. Okay, well, that's 25 minutes of savings across every single employee, across every single person and every function in your organization. 5 minutes here, 30 minutes there, an hour there turns into hours and days and months worth of like human work, right? So that's how it needs to be looked at.
Absolutely. And I think it's so applicable to the tourism space, because when you're thinking about valuable experiences that people are having at tourist attractions and things like that, it's not, well, the data was really clean at the DMO that I happened to be at. It was like I had a really valuable conversation with someone who knew the area really well and they were able to recommend XYZ, or I went on this great tour with whoever and we had an amazing experience. So we've talked about labor shortages. You can take that time and actually make your job more fun, first of all, whether or not you're going on the fun tour and getting to tell everyone about the place that you love. But at least you're not doing this painful activity for nearly as long. And hopefully you're adding way more value to the guests that you're inviting into your experience.
Yeah, 100%. Yeah. I sort of, that's to me, that's the lowest hanging fruit for tourism, right?
Absolutely.
It's just sort of enabling your workforce to actually provide tourists with great experiences. That's the unlock for me.
Absolutely. Nice. Well, I think that's a good spot to cap it off. Lots of value in this episode. So hopefully you all enjoyed listening. And if you have any questions, if you want to reach out about collaboration, or you just want to get more involved in having some of those really critical conversations about AI and getting it in more entrenched in your organization, please do reach out to us. Peter is Tourism AI Guy online, or you can catch us at the tourismainetwork.com. We'd love to hear from you. Thanks so much.
Thank you.
Thanks for tuning in to another episode of the Tourism AI podcast. To learn more about the network or get involved, visit our website at tourismainetwork.com or find us on socials at Tourism AI Network. We'll see you there.